public imagination remains fixated on launch signatures and hypersonic trajectories. This is a fundamental misreading of the strategic calculus. The kinetic cost of attritional warfare, as confirmed by ongoing assessments from the Institute for the Study of War, has rendered conventional victory a mathematical impossibility. When a nuclear-armed state is contained, its leverage pivots from battlefield assets to an asymmetric attack on its adversary's core structural liability, debt. The vectors for this attack are not missiles. They are silent. Analysts at RUSI and CSIS identify two primary fronts: the subsea data cables and the satellite constellations that form the nervous system of global finance. This is not sabotage. It is a protocol designed to trigger a systemic solvency crisis. Severing these connections initiates an automated collapse, as a system where money is debt, per Ray Dalio's framework, cannot function without price discovery. The institutional fragility is an accelerant, with internal political attacks on the Federal Reserve weakening the state's ability to respond. The resulting entity is the blind Leviathan, a superpower stripped of its situational awareness, its financial architecture imploding like the Sachs global bankruptcy, with only a launch-on-warning posture as its final recourse. The motive is not territory, it is solvency. When a nation initiates a kinetic war it cannot afford, the conflict itself becomes the primary liability on its national balance sheet. The objective ceases to be conquest. It becomes a desperate race against its own bankruptcy. RUSI analysis frames the war not as a geopolitical gambit, but as an unpopular self-inflicted solvency crisis. Every tank lost, every missile fired, increases a domestic debt load that threatens the regime's existence more than any external military force. This is not speculation, it is mathematical certainty. Battlefield assessments from the Institute for the Study of War confirm this dynamic. Reports detail a grinding, high-cost offensive with marginal territorial gain. When the kinetic cost of victory exceeds a nation's ability to remain solvent, the strategy is invalidated. A pivot is no longer a choice. It is a forced, logical imperative. Weakness forces asymmetry. Blockaded on the battlefield, the only remaining vector is the adversary's primary structural vulnerability, its finance. The core principle of this new warfare is that all fiat currencies are, as analysts like Ray Dalio state, a form of debt. An attack on solvency is therefore an attack on the foundational protocol of the entire Western system. This economic attack vector is supercharged by internal division. As CSIS reports confirm, political attacks on financial institutions like the Federal Reserve degrade public trust and create the exact fragility an adversary can exploit. It's the financial equivalent of a pre-existing condition, turning a manageable shock into a systemic collapse. Therefore, the motive is survival through mirrored destruction. Unable to win a war of attrition, the aggressor is forced to trigger a war of bankruptcy. It is the only leverage a cornered, nuclear-armed debtor state has left. This isn't a secondary front. It is the main event, creating a direct pathway to a launch-on-warning scenario by threatening the institutional collapse of both sides. The kinetic cost of a modern main battle tank is $5 million. The cost of the first-person view, or FPV, drone that can achieve a total asset kill is $500. That is not an operational error. It is a mathematical certainty. This 10,000 to 1 cost asymmetry, documented by analysts at RUSI, is the central equation of modern warfare. This is the democratization of violence. The capacity to neutralize a multi-million-dollar state asset is no longer gated by a nation's industrial base. It is gated by a credit card transaction. For every single kinetic platform a superpower fields, an adversary can field 10,000 liabilities against it. The battlefield has become an accountant's ledger, and the West is losing on margin. This economic warfare creates an inescapable vector towards a solvency crisis. When a nuclear-armed state is kinetically contained by this low-cost attrition, its most expensive military hardware becomes a balance sheet liability. Its only remaining leverage is an asymmetric attack against the core vulnerability of its adversary, the structural integrity of its debt. The final protocol is not a launch-on warning for incoming missiles. It is a launch-on warning for terminal credit failure. The threat is not a military defeat. It is an institutional collapse from which there is no recovery. This is the main event. The primary vectors of systemic attack are not where you are told to look. While legacy media focuses on kinetic battlefields, documented by sources like the Institute for the Study of War, Source No. 1, the true staging grounds are gray zones, regions engineered for contained chaos. These are not failures of local governance. They are proxy laboratories. The objective is to test financial warfare protocols in a live environment before deploying them against the core target, Western solvency. Consider the operational blueprint. CSIS analysts identify a pattern: engineered supply chain disruptions in resource-rich but politically fragile states. The goal is not territorial gain. It is to model the shock propagation through the global credit system. When a key asset is paralyzed by instability, the intended effect isn't on the ground. It's a calculated stress test on commodity futures, insurance liabilities, and currency swap lines. This is a live-fire exercise for a full-spectrum solvency crisis, a scenario made more acute by pre-existing fragility seen in events like the Sachs global bankruptcy, Source No. 4. This is the core of asymmetric strategy. When a nuclear-armed state is contained by conventional force, its final leverage is not a launch-on warning protocol. It is an attack on the mathematical certainty that underpins the entire fiat system, that money is debt. Source No. 2. The gray zones are where adversaries refine the minimal kinetic cost required to trigger a systemic deleveraging event. They learn the precise input needed to make an adversary's biggest asset, its institutional trust, its primary liability. The chaos is a symptom, a calibration tool. The disease is the debt itself, and the vector for a nuclear exchange is now financial, not military. The launch-on warning protocol is not an act of aggression. It is a mathematical calculation of survival. According to analysts at CSIS, the doctrine grants commanders pre-delegated authority to launch a retaliatory strike the instant an incoming nuclear attack is detected, but before it impacts. The objective is to guarantee a response even if command and control is decapitated. The system is designed to be a zero-sum deterrent. This protocol contains a systemic liability, an adversary contained by conventional kinetic force, as documented in assessments by the Institute for the Study of War, does not need to fire a missile. They can fire a line of code. A coordinated cyber attack can blind early warning radar and satellite networks, creating what strategists call the fog of digital war. The screens go black. In that moment, the commander faces an impossible choice. Is the system blind because of a technical failure, a deliberate hack, or because the satellites that provide the data have already been destroyed by an unannounced first strike? Waiting for visual confirmation guarantees annihilation if the attack is real. Launching risks global incineration over a digital ghost. The protocol is weaponized against itself. This is the true asymmetric vector. For a state facing a solvency crisis, where, as Ray Dalio states, all fiat currency is already in trouble, the kinetic cost of war is unsustainable. The digital attack is the leverage. It creates a direct threat of institutional collapse, forcing a choice that threatens the adversary's very existence without firing a single shot. It is economic warfare executed at the nuclear threshold. The kinetic cost of containment is now a fixed liability. The January 2026 battlefield assessments from the Institute for the Study of War confirm a strategic stalemate, creating a mathematical certainty. The primary vector of attack is no longer territorial. It is financial. When a nuclear-armed state is boxed in, its only remaining leverage is an asymmetric strike against its adversary's core structural weakness. This weakness is not a secret. Ray Dalio's analysis is clinical. All fiat currencies are in jeopardy because money is debt. This is the foundational vulnerability. The accelerant is internal political division, which erodes institutional trust. As noted by The Guardian, public attacks on the Federal Reserve create the exact political volatility an adversary can exploit to amplify a solvency crisis. A full-spectrum economic attack is not the initial protocol. First comes the calibration shot, an attribution impossible event designed to test the system's fragility and the leadership's response protocol. The goal is not destruction, but the demonstration of capability. It is a message delivered in the language of systemic disruption, not kinetic force. The specific forecast for the next 12 months is a targeted 3-hour disruption of the automated clearinghouse ACH network, timed to a Friday afternoon settlement window. It will be publicly attributed to a cascading software update failure. Billions in transactions will be suspended, not stolen. The resulting liquidity freeze, though temporary, will be a direct attack on solvency. This is the main event.